Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addicted makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multichromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter. And today, in honor of the new guessing game that is coming out for Nomad Cosmetics, I'm going to rank the 17 palettes I already own from them. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me. We're getting into it right now. Okay, and it is getting toasty in my filming room, so we've got to move this right along. This is video number 3 for me. Starting with number 17 is the Nomad Berlin Underground palette, and the reason I put this down at number 17 is, number one, it's kind of like this grungy color story, so not my absolute favorite, but it's also basically all satin shades, and I'm not a huge satin shade wearer, so I have kept this over time for the collector's mentality, and I love these kind of metallic-y cool tones, but it's just not a palette that I run after. Coming in at number 16 is the Categena Magica palette, and this one I do really like. I think it's very pretty, but it's very warm toned, and obviously I'm very cool toned, so on me it just it's not perfect. That doesn't mean I don't wear it, but but it's just it's not my number one kind of thing, so it fell closer to the bottom because the mattes, I mean, they all kind of look the same after a while. The metallics in here are gorgeous, but I just it's just not my favorite. Yeah. So coming in at 14, this is the Nomad and America's Parks palette. Now, I love the packaging for this one. This one is really cool. And the inside, I do like some of the colors, like the blue-green kind of shades in here, this shade here, and then these shades here I do think are really, really pretty. But all these kind of warm neutrals, the brown here, I don't necessarily need them. They're not my favorite kind of shades to work with. So this one fell a little bit lower, again, just because it's full of a lot of colors that I don't necessarily use. But I do really like the colors that are in here that I prefer, like that 9pan basically. Next up is the Nomad Orient Express palette, and this one came up a little higher because it does have some more cooler toned matte shades, and then these singles that are along the actual trail line in here I do think are really pretty. Like this one, the champagne, has a really soft peachy kind of shimmer to it. I really like the blue that's in here. This kind of gold green duochrome shade is very, very pretty. Again, some warm tones that I'm not necessarily going to use, but the shades in here that I do like, I really like. So it kind of floats towards the middle of the bottom, if you will. Plus, I love this packaging. Next up is the Nomad Haunted Europe palette, and this is for much the same reason. This 9pan over here I really don't care too much about. This 9pan over here I really like a lot, so I end up not reaching for this one as much because I know there's a bunch of shades in here I won't necessarily use, so this one doesn't get as much love from me. But I think the actual palette design and everything is really cool. I love the haunted vibe of everything, so a little higher but still towards the bottom. And then this Lake Como, the Lago de Como palette is coming in next. This should be, what, 12? And this one, I really like all these blue shades in here, but the greens and the yellowy kind of beige shades don't do anything for me. Now that I have a lot of their newer palettes, I feel like this one doesn't necessarily have an integral role in my collection. But again, I keep it because it's Nomad. And then this one is the Hudson Valley palette. This one I put in here a little bit higher, number 1, because I really like these cool tones and these kind of olivey shades over here. And I love this pop of bright, bright red. I think these shades over in this third column are the ones I'm least likely to touch, but everything else in here I think is pretty. It strikes a vibe. I have not actually used this palette yet though, so I ranked this one without trying it because I know Nomad's quality is quite good. Based on the color story, this is where I would put it. All right, now we're into top 10. Hooray! So coming in at number 10, this is the Nomad Antilles palette, and this one is kind of their Tropical Brights palette from the collection of palettes they were doing before they kind of rebranded. So this one has lots of like, again, kind of satiny shades, but they're in these really bright poppy tropical colors. So I like that more than the satins from the Berlin palette. I think Nomad has moved in a good direction though, giving us more intense shimmers in their palettes. So this one fell kind of towards the bottom, despite the fact that it's a pretty color story, because the quality or the finish of these shades is not my favorite. Coming in at number 9, this is the palette nobody speaks about. This is the Nomad and Shanghai palette. And it is a dual-sided palette that opens kind of like this. Ooh. Can I do it? Can I do it? No. And so you basically have a bunch of mattes over here with a metallic white in the center. And then on this side, you have a bunch of metallic shimmery shades with a matte black in the center. I like the duality of this palette. I do agree that the shades over here are pretty neutral and beige, but I think if you go on to like the streets of Shanghai, these are colors you would probably see: gray, beige, brown, you know, so I don't know, like I get what they were doing with it and I think it's a cool palette. I'm not offended by it personally, but it's also not for me to, like, I'm not the intended target of any of that, so I'm sad that that kind of forced them to like stop production and kind of rebrand, if you will. But I think overall it's still kind of a cool palette. And I love the packaging. I think that packaging is really cool. All right. Next up is the Bosque Nuboso de Monteverde palette. And this is their Cloud Forest palette from, I want to say Costa Rica. Although it does not say. But anyway, so this is their like newer kind of like brights tropical palette, and then they have like pops of basically all metallic greens in here. The only ones that are not green are this one, and although this one has a green base, it has a really strong kind of pinky red shift, so I think that green base gets a little bit lost. But I love the brights in here, like this and this, these shades over here. I mean, these are just like poppy bright shades, and I really, really like that. So overall, this one came up a little higher because of the poppy brights, not necessarily the metallics, which is a surprise for me because I tend to love metallics more. Next up is the Paradise Islands palette. I love the packaging on this. It just looks like a relaxing getaway that I think we all could use. And so this is the inside of the palette. I like that they did like kind of these slushy, corally, papaya, pinky type orange shades in here. You've got these beautiful greens in here, a couple of blues. I don't know that I necessarily needed this like perfectly royal blue. Maybe they could have done something a little bit deeper, like a navy or something, because this palette doesn't really have a great grounding shade. This green and this blue are the two deepest shades in the palette, but I don't think they work well to ground everything. So I think even though this is a really nice palette, I love the color story, it ends up being a companion palette because I need something else to round out my mattes, but super cute nonetheless. Okay, and coming in at number 6, this was hard because I thought I was going to put this palette like almost at the top. And then when I started thinking about it realistically, I was like, I don't think this belongs at the top. So the next one I have is the Tokyo Harajuku palette. And this is the one that has a bunch of pastels and then this row of really pretty buttery duochromes. I like this palette so much. I love the softness and blendability of the mattes, and you get, these are kind of like a satiny type formula. These are more true matte formula, but I think they blend out really nicely together. The trouble is I don't tend to use pastels a ton, which makes me wonder why I have like 15 pastel palettes, but that's a conversation for another day. But this bottom row here, these are really, really pretty, and I wish I would come into this palette more just to play with these particular shades. I tend not to think of this palette as having like beautiful toppers, and I should. So it fell to number 6 because while I think it would be useful for that, I don't tend to do that, and in general I don't wear this palette very often, but it's gorgeous. Oh my gosh. All right, we're getting into top 5. I'm really excited. Okay, coming in at number 5, is this right? Yeah. Coming in at number 5 is the Land of Fire and Ice. This is their Iceland palette. This is a gorgeous color story, you guys. All these really pretty blues and like algae type greens, so pretty. I don't really care about this fire row, but I'm glad that they kind of kept that small, and then everything else is kind of like cool tones around it. This shade right here is like an olive green metallic, but it has like these turquoise blue sparkles in it. So pretty and unique and interesting, and I think these two shades complement it very, very nicely. I love the matte blues that they used in here. Very, very pretty. Again, this purple I think kind of stands out a little bit odd, but everything else in here I really, really like. So this one came up to, what did I say, 5. All right, top 4 is the Nomad Royal Europe palette, and this is the one that just came out most recently before they're sneaking the next palette. And it's so funny, they literally sneaked and launched this like right before we then had like a change of leadership in the UK royal family, so that's very interesting. But long live Princess Di. I don't like you, King Charles. Anyway, this palette is super, super pretty. My only gripe with this palette is that all these deep tones, they kind of start to look the same when you blend them on the eye. Like these two look the same, these two look the same, these 4 tend to kind of look the same. You can't really get like distinct color differences when you start to use more than one of them at a time. But the multi-chrome shades down here save this palette. Black-based multi-chromes, gorgeous. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Those are my favorite. So this one comes up super high. Packaging is gorgeous. The multi-chromes are gorgeous. The mattes are nice. I just need some lighter mattes to kind of blend everything out. Coming in at number 3, this, I did not expect this palette to make it up as high as it did, but when I was ranking it, I'm like, nope, the other things I like less. So I was very shocked at this one. But this is the Whistler Snow Lodge palette. This one I think came out last fall, winter time, and it's so pretty. Oh my gosh. This blue in here is stunning. This blue is like my favorite. I love these kind of like soft minty pine green type shades. Again, these neutrals I could really care less about. This brown even I don't necessarily mind. I think it matches out with the blues very nicely, kind of like that Melt Blueprint palette. It kind of gives me that vibe. I like this metallic-y iridescent white to pink shade, and then you do have a really nice black in here to kind of round everything out. So overall, I think this is a really pretty palette. I'm not sure what on earth the background is supposed to be other than like a table, but then there's like this weird solid part that's not a table. I don't really know what that is, but anyway, maybe that means something to somebody else. But I really like it. Coming in at number 2, this is the Nomad Verona palette, Amore Morte, and obviously this packaging is like next level. When they did the sneak peek for this one, I was like jumping out of my skin, so excited. And then this is what the color story looks like. Now obviously this pink side is a bit redundant, so I don't necessarily get super worked up about it, but this side, I really like. This side is awesome. The grays, the blues, the plummy purple colors, this kind of like gold, this kind of like goldy type shade here, so pretty. Now my palette probably doesn't look as worn as you would expect, and it's because it's actually the second one. They had to replace it because my first one, which obviously it looks a little bit more worn, had a couple of shades that hard panned immediately, and apparently that was an issue that they had with the palettes. So when I contacted them, they said they would just send me another one to hopefully resolve that issue, which it did. So my palette doesn't look super used because I haven't used it as much after I got the replacement as I was using it before, to try to figure out, did I really need to have the like created waste of getting a replacement. But I'm very appreciative to the fact that they did go ahead and replace it for me so that I could use the higher quality. And then coming in at number 1, this I did not expect. This, when I was thinking about all my Nomad palettes, I didn't even honestly remember that this palette was in my drawer. But as soon as I pulled it out, I was like, oh yes, that palette. And it's the Fetes de Provence palette, and it looks like this. These like smoky colors with this kind of smoky blue shade, the purples that are in here, the pinks that are in here, even the yellows I don't mind. I think they are super pretty. The peaches I would say is like my least used row out of this particular palette, but overall I think it's gorgeous. I love the little like bee vibes that they have all over this. The only thing I don't really love, like this is not my taste for like art. I appreciate that they didn't just like slap a wine bottle on it and like some grapes and call it a day, but this kind of like pop art kind of vibe is not for me. So I much rather some of the other packaging from their other palettes, but the color story in this one, definitely a winner. Alright, and with that said, that is everything for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll catch you in my next video.